Quinten Post. Are you kidding me? Quinten Post is the player of this game. The Clippers came into the Warriors arena with a 7-game winning streak against the Warriors. The Warriors have been dominated by the Clippers in recent years. Nobody has been able to contain Zubac in the paint, and that changed in this game. And it all started with Quinten Post. You know, last night's game, I noticed that Quinten Post, despite getting limited playing time, he was actually really good in the minutes that he played, from boxing out to rebounding to staying in front of a guy like Ja Morant in the paint. I mean, some of that was just different for me. Quinten Post last season, for me, was not a reliable defender. He was slow-footed. He didn't act like a guy who was 7 feet tall. He was losing rebounds to little guards who would just strip the ball away from him because Post was just so weak. And Post was a 5-year college player coming into the league at almost 25. And it's like, well, he's kind of done growing in terms of what potential he has as a basketball player. Sure, you can improve incrementally, but by the time you're 24, 25 years old, you kind of are who you are for the most part. So an older guy like that, if they come into the NBA, they have to be good right away, and they have to show defensive discipline, all these things right away. If they don't show it, the odds of them becoming that is highly unlikely, especially later in the second round of the draft. So I didn't expect Quinten Post to be any different. I didn't like how he looked with the starting lineup last season. Their defense broke apart. He wasn't even good on offense because the offense, when they start, is never prioritized or looking for him in any kind of way from the three-point line. I did like him with the second unit, the beginning of the second and the fourth quarter with Jimmy Butler in there, traditional big lineup. You guys know I always talk about that. But in the playoffs last season, I knew he wouldn't be viable with the type of defense that he was playing in the regular season. If you're weak in the regular season, you better believe that you're going to be weak in the playoffs against the best competition on the planet. And I didn't particularly love what I saw from Post either in the preseason. I didn't really see anything new or different. But when the season started, whenever Quinten Post has gotten minutes, he's been pretty good. And again, last night, he really surprised me. And then tonight, he blew me away. Zubac started 2 of 6 from the floor to start the first quarter, and most of it was against Quinten Post. I could have never imagined that. Zubac is one of the toughest guards at that center spot in the league. But Post was strong, he was tenacious, and he didn't allow a whole lot of ground when Zubac threw a body into him, a shoulder into him, or whatever. Post kept his ground. And that speaks to the improvement in his strength and his level of grit and his willingness to be a great defender out there as much as humanly possible. And this is a development that I did not see coming at all for the Warriors whatsoever. I thought defensively, Trace would still be way better than Quinten Post. But in terms of defense and the post, in the paint area, Post has leaped Trace. And we all know how potent Post is as a shooter. He's one of the best three-point shooting centers in the league. All the doubt and disbelief that I had about Post coming into this season and what he's shown already, apologies to Post, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Show that you can be a two-way center in the NBA and for the Warriors. And if he can start consistently doing this for this team, it changes everything for this team. And we just got a glimpse of what that could look like. I was literally smiling ear to ear throughout the course of this game, watching the things that Quinten Post was doing out there and how effective and powerful he was. He led all players in this game, plus 34 against the Clippers. Plus 34 in 25 minutes of play. Are you kidding me? If he can continue to provide two-way play for the Warriors at that center spot, he's got to turn me into a stan. Now again, like last night with the 3-2 timeline guys, can Post keep this up? Can he be consistent? And if he can do that, the Warriors are much closer to contention than I believed coming into this season. And that's got me fired up. But of course, there's plenty more to discuss in terms of what happened in this game, how the 3 timeline guys looked after an amazing performance the night before, how did Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond look on the second night of a back-to-back. What good things and bad things did Steve Kerr end up doing? We'll get to all of those things, and if that sounds good to you, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. Let's get straight to it. 3 timeline guys definitely could not replicate what they did last night. Both Kuminga and Moody were pretty inefficient in terms of their scoring, but in terms of coexisting with what the Warriors were doing, I thought they were just fine. There's not a lot of complaints there. Brandon Podziemski, now probably permanently coming off the bench, had a pretty good performance on both ends of the floor. Had some timely buckets, hit a big buzzer-beating 3-point shot to end the first quarter. He had a pretty awesome block on Chris Paul in transition, and then he went down on the other end and finished with a reverse layup in transition. 12 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Really good overall game. Steph Curry, once again, didn't have to overly tax himself on the second night of a back-to-back. He was kind of just pacing himself for the most part. Didn't really have it going from the three-point line. Only shot 2 of 8 from the three-point line. But overall, he shot 7 of 15 from the field. 19 points, 8 assists, 2 steals. Defensively, he just looks really good. A huge part of the reason why the Warriors are in the position that they're in and why we expect them to be in contention this season is because Steph Curry at point guard can still play defense with the best of them. 37-year-old star players at any position, let alone point guard. Everybody at this age starts to diminish pretty notably on the defensive end of the floor. But Steph Curry, you watch him on the defensive end of the floor and he's never a weakness. Whoever he ends up getting switched on, almost always he keeps that guy in front of him. Even James Harden, a bunch of times Steph Curry ended up on a switch against him. One time he just stripped him clean, and other times he just forced James Harden to step back and take a tough shot. And that's what great defenders do. They don't allow blow-bys. They keep their man in front of them by being strong with the body, being firm, and not getting bumped off when a shoulder is thrown into their shoulder. That is strength, toughness, and grit. And we continue to not appreciate that aspect of his game enough. Again, if he was a weakness on the defensive end of the floor, the Warriors' contention with him as their primary star, that's when those days would start to diminish greatly. Without viable defense from all 5 positions, it is really hard for you to be a true contending team in the NBA. And Draymond was a plus 29 in this game. He continues to go underappreciated because he's not some big time scorer, but he's the glue guy that just holds it all together. Only 7 points in this game, but a bunch of goodies on the stat sheet. 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, a 3-point shot. And at that power forward spot, he is just such a powerful and reliable defender. He causes and creates havoc. He gets stops. And when you don't tax him to death at the center spot, forcing him to protect a bunch of non-viable lineups, Draymond still looks incredible. And his great defense is a huge part of the reason why the Warriors were able to hold the Clippers to 79 points in this game. 79 points. The Warriors defense was a huge issue in the first 3 games. Steve Kerr ran a bunch of small lineups, and whenever they did that, the Warriors ran into problems. So yes, Draymond Green, when in his element, when he's allowed to play more power forward than center, he is as powerful as ever. And still one of the best, if not the best defender in the league. And then you got Jimmy Butler, just steady as ever. He just doesn't shoot a whole lot, but he takes over when he needs to. For the most part, it didn't seem like he did all that much. Only took 12 shots in this game, and yet you look up and he has 20 points. And he shot 3 of 4 from the 3-point line. This is something that I talked about when the season started, feeling like Jimmy Butler really worked on his 3-point shot so that he's not a liability from out there. So even though his volume is low, if he can be efficient in the times when he does shoot those threes and is super timely, that is really important for the Warriors. Plus 20 in this game to go with 5 rebounds and 5 assists, and he really controls these certain lineups when he staggered from Steph Curry the second quarter, the fourth quarter, the end of the first quarter. These are the times when Jimmy Butler is staggered from Steph Curry, and the Warriors almost tend to thrive in those moments when Steph Curry's sitting down, and that just continues to be a super refreshing thing to watch. He shows on most nights that he's such a reliable go-to number 1 option when Steph Curry sits, and he did it again in that third quarter. Steph Curry sat, and we saw a couple of units around him, and these are passable lineups as long as there's a center next to him, and Jimmy Butler isn't being asked to play center like we've seen the last couple of games or so. So the defense around him is solid, the shooting around him is solid, and that's all he needs. That's all the spacing he needs to do what he needs to do. In that third quarter, after Steph Curry sat and the Warriors brought back momentum to their team, he scored 8 out of the next 10 points for the Warriors late in that third quarter, and continuing to build upon what the starting unit did to start that third quarter. And when you have that number 1 guy doing what he wants to do against the other team, that gives the supplementary players more power, more energy, and more confidence to hit the shots that they need to hit when they're open. Because if you don't have a number 1 guy and they're not doing their thing, that puts the pressure on the secondary, the third option, fourth options. All the pressure in the world is on their shoulders. They feel it because they see that there's nobody on the floor that is reliable enough to help carry them. So every shot feels heavy even if they're wide open when the Warriors can't score and the other team is finding momentum against these ridiculous defensive units. That's been the case for the Warriors for so many years, and we don't have to deal with that anymore thanks to Jimmy Butler. Oh, and you want to hear something really crazy? I think James Harden scored 20 points in the first half of this game. The Warriors initially had a 15-point lead halfway through-ish into the second quarter. Quinten Post started the game and then started the beginning of the second quarter, and he was a plus 20 in the minutes that he played in that first half. And he only got 12 minutes of playing time. Honestly, because of how well he played, I feel that Steve Kerr should have put him back into the game and let him play more minutes, because when a player does really well, you're supposed to reward that play. Steve Kerr has a tendency to go with robotic rotations and just kind of fail to see that certain guys are playing better than other guys. And he ends up underutilizing somebody who's either hot or playing really well in that game, and he benches his own hot player, and it takes the momentum away from his own team. Anyway, the transition from that second quarter with the second unit going into the next unit actually looked pretty good. Quinten Post took a seat. In came Al Horford and Will Richard. So now the lineup is Potts, Will Richard, Jimmy Butler, Draymond, and Al Horford. And that is a fundamentally good lineup. And then Steve Kerr went wonky again with this stupid lineup that just doesn't work. It didn't work in that Lakers game. Remember the film that I showed you? The Warriors gave up a 16-point lead in the blink of an eye with the same kind of unit where there's 3 guards on the floor. Kuminga is at the power forward spot with Al Horford left to dry to protect this nonsensical lineup. So it starts with Steph Curry, Will Richard, and Buddy Hield. That's a 3-guard lineup. Steve Kerr's continued obsession and the need to play Buddy Hield compromises the size, the defense, and the structure of what the Warriors need to be. To make this lineup easily make more sense, all you have to do is replace Buddy Hield with Guy Santos. Then you have Steph Curry, Will Richard at POA, Kuminga at the 3, and then you put Santos at the 4. Now you have a 6'8" guy, a hustler, defender, rebounder, a help guy next to Al Horford, and now your defense just looks much better. You look much less compromised. And then Will Richard sits and GP2 comes into the game, and all of a sudden you have 6'2", 6'2", 6'4", a 3-guard senseless tiny lineup. Kuminga once again is at the power forward spot, and he's guarding like Batum out in the perimeter, so he's not even in the paint area anymore. And there were situations where the Clippers were running pick and roll and forcing a switch where Al Horford is guarding James Harden. Now your center is out at the 3-point line. Kuminga is outside guarding a shooter. Next thing you know, you have 6'2", 6'2", and a 6'4" guy trying to protect the paint, and Zubac is in the paint. Does that make any sense to you? Can you make any logical sense out of what Steve Kerr did there? The Clippers wanted to go on an insane run. A 19-4 run they went on. This tiny lineup had a deficit of 14-4. 14-4. That is how you erase a 15-point lead in the blink of an eye. I mean, just look at the size difference here. See, the other teams, when they go smaller, their smaller guys are a bunch of wings. You saw that with the Blazers. When the Warriors go small, they go the tiniest on planet Earth, the smallest lineups literally you've ever seen in your life in the NBA, and they're getting trounced by a bunch of wings. Seriously, how does anybody account for this nonsense right here? Look at this situation. Steph Curry and Buddy Hield surrounding 7-foot Zubac. What do you think is going to happen there? Even if Horford manages to stop James Harden and the Warriors get a stop, who's going to get the rebound here? Steve Kerr has already fundamentally failed his own team with this nonsensical lineup. So even though the Warriors got out to an incredible start, 33-25 in that first quarter, ultimately they were down 3 points, 49-46. They scored 13 points in the second quarter. The point of going small, once again, is to be efficient and powerful on the offensive end of the floor, be able to score. But the problem is when they go to these smaller lineups, they can never score. Score 4 points to the Clippers 14 points. You're getting owned on the defensive end of the floor, and you're getting nothing good on the offensive end of the floor. This has been going on for years and years and years, and the Warriors were this segment away from blowing the Clippers out by like 30 points. And that's the good news about the second half. The Warriors were able to recover their 15-point lead with that starting unit. Again, Quinten Post ended up being a plus 34. He just did such an amazing job. Look at this here. Look at how low he got to the ground to try to stay in front of Kawhi Leonard. Are you kidding me? Quinten Post's development early in this season is the most exciting thing to me. Kuminga finally coming into his own, really buying into the system, not forcing anything, being a playmaker, being a willing rebounder, being a willing defender, these things, I appreciate it. I don't blame him at all for the fact that he was put in this situation in that second quarter where he's at power forward and he's out in the perimeter and he's forced to play with these small lineups and his value is tanking. Al Horford's value is completely tanking. Al Horford ended up being a minus 12 overall in this game. At some point, he was like a minus 20. And I can't blame Al Horford for that because nobody can protect these lineups. And that's a part of the reason why with Trace as well, well last season especially, I had to defend this guy because he kept being put in these situations where he's compromised instead of being allowed to play with really great units and being able to thrive defensively and being more helpful. And it was the exact same thing with Kevon Looney. Kevon Looney actually was able to hold up really well, protecting 4-guard lineups and a lot of nonsense. That's why I had an appreciation for him, because he did all the dirty work and he was a fantastic rebounder, and he did his job first and foremost as a center and anchor, a guy who rebounds, is able to complete defensive possessions, and these things are powerful. Anyway, we did see that closing lineup with Al Horford in there only for the second quarter, and they did manage to kind of salvage that situation from really getting out of hand with that unit. And fortunately, in the fourth quarter, the Warriors didn't really have to use that lineup because it was a blowout. The starting unit of that fourth quarter really just blew the Clippers out. They had a 23 point lead, and then Steph Curry came in for like a minute or two, and with about 5 minutes left to go, the Clippers gave up. James Harden, Kawhi Leonard took a seat. Steph Curry basically didn't have to play the final 5 minutes of this game, and he took it easy last game. So this is super refreshing to play back-to-back and for Steph Curry to play reasonable minutes, not get overworked, not trying to carry the entire team on his back. And what a wonderful way to preserve the veterans. And even to close out the fourth quarter, once Quinten Post and these guys sat, Steve Kerr didn't elect to go to stupid small lineup. He kept Draymond into the game when Steph Curry came in. So Draymond is still at power forward. Al Horford is still at the center spot. You got Moody at shooting guard. More size. He can be really good at the shooting guard instead of small forward, power forward, all this crazy stuff that Steve Kerr likes to do. Moses Moody at the shooting guard spot, 6'5", 7'1" wingspan. And then you got Kuminga at the 3 where he belongs. And then again, Draymond, Al Horford, 4 and the 5. So that fourth quarter, the lineups are completely normal, and it ends up being a wire-to-wire victory. The score is 98-79. The Warriors scored 98 points and beat the other team by 19 points. This is what a serious and contending team looks like, ladies and gentlemen. Remember that 21-22 season. You look at that 18-2 start, the Warriors were dominating and looking superstars of the other team look silly, and they were winning games by 20-30 points. And that's how you know the Warriors have something real and something serious, and they just showed serious signs of that on the back end of a back-to-back against a legitimate team in the Clippers. So what an incredible stand at home. They're now 4-1, which is awesome. But now the Warriors have a big test coming up. Probably one of the biggest tests of the season is coming up right now. 10 of their next 12 games are on the road, and it starts on Thursday against the Milwaukee Bucks. What they did in these last 2 games at home was really, really sweet to watch. But adversity hits when you're on the road. Your role players don't play as well when they're on the road. So can the youth of the Warriors withstand the pressures of playing on the road and playing on the road for as long as they're about to do? You can really make the argument that their biggest test of this season is coming really soon, over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Challenging times are ahead. Difficult teams are coming up. We'll see how it all goes. But if this development of the younger players, especially Quinten Post, continues, we're going to be coming out of this long road trip schedule feeling really, really good about what we can expect from the Warriors. And it's getting clearer and clearer to me as things are starting to develop, and with the development of Quinten Post, that what the Warriors need to do now is to try to go get that piece that is like a stretch 4. A stretch 4 is a guy who can play like small forward, power forward, and in a pinch, even center. So that means he's a really good connective defensive guy, basically an Otto Porter, a guy who is reliable at the 3-point line, a guy who can move his feet and guard like 3-4 different positions. And bare minimum, they need to use Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield does not belong on this team. The Warriors simply have too many guards. I think GP2 you hold on to for the playoffs for certain matchups for him to be available to play spot minutes. Buddy Hield is not useful on this team. It forces a lot of useless 3-guard lineups that really compromises the Warriors defense. And if you simply replace Buddy Hield with a more reliable guy with more size, that is going to take the one weakness that the Warriors have away from them and away from Steve Kerr. So that's how I see it as of right now. The game ball clearly goes to Quinten Post, the most impactful player alongside Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler in this game. Thank you so much for watching. Steph Curry is the GOAT.